Oh, hi. Welcome to Aquatazoo, where we like to nerd out over all things zoo and aquarium related. I'm l.semple, and today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about dealing with contractors and vendors. I had recently been kind of going through different teams and how important they are and how often they come into play when you don't know it in zoos and aquariums, right? And I figured there's another group that I should probably cover that may also not be noticed necessarily or not be recognized as being anything but zoo or aquarium staff, and that's because they are the talented folks who may be our contractors and vendors. Despite the fact that these folks are not exactly employed by the institution or whoever owns that institution, whether it's a state-run facility or a city-run facility or a federal facility, there may still be people that are working on site for the zoo or aquarium that are kind of disguised, I would say. They do kind of look like they are part of our staff, but they're not actually. And these are people that are employed by the organization to contribute in their special way that we, as the staff members, cannot do. In some cases, these fine folks are disguised. They're wearing this similar uniform or are kind of made to look as though they are a seamless part of this organization, even though they are paid by another company, another entity entirely. So first, let's get into why you would have a need for contractors and vendors. Why wouldn't you just hire more people to do that work? In some cases, we're talking about very specialized work that the staff doesn't necessarily know how to do and wouldn't come up often enough for us to have someone on staff to do that all the time. For example, at the institution where I work, we had a company come in to redo some floors in our service areas. And so they are fabulous folks that are very talented in what they do. Do we always have floors that need to be redone? We do not. And so we just hire the company that has the expertise to do the work, do it right, do it to our specifications and work with us. But also we're just paying this company to provide those people and, their talents and the service because we don't have enough work for them to employ somebody on staff all the time to do floors. As much as we would all love to employ more people and have more folks that we can call on at a moment's notice to be able to work on things like that and to employ special talents and skills, it is not always the case that that is a practical solution for things. And there may be times where an organization, a zoo or aquarium, may not be able to afford some of these trade jobs in particular that require a lot of expertise and understanding of the medium or, the environment and all that kind of stuff. We may not actually be able to retain somebody on our payroll with those kinds of credentials and actually keep them busy, And that's when we call an external company or, an individual who we know has that talent and is willing to lend that to us for a little bit to get whatever project we need done, because we can't necessarily do everything ourselves. We all have our talents, our strengths, and our weaknesses. Mine is not flooring. So we have to call in the people that do that well. If you need somebody to keep a fish alive, call me. But if you need a floor redone, don't call me. Is there enough work for a person who knows how to keep fish alive in an aquarium? Yes, more than likely. That's the kind of person you need to have on staff. They're going to have a full job all the time, and we need those skills, right? And same for somebody who's a really good leader. Same for somebody who's good at organizing projects. There are certain types of jobs and types of skills that we need all the time. And those are the people that we generally have on our payroll. The ones that we don't always have, that might be either something that we're not ready to pay for all the time or just not a need that we have all the time, every time we're open every day. especially when there's a lot of building going on. That's a lot of activity that's happening in a short period of time, relatively short, depending on the project, but it's temporary, right? So you want some architects to design everything, and you want some engineers to make sure that it's all sturdy and that it's going to last. You want to make sure that you have the people who are good at working with the materials building things for you, because they're going to do a much better job than I, the fish person, would, that's for sure. You might want a specialized electrician for something. You might want a landscaping company to come in and make sure that everything looks really good and that everything's done in a short period of time, but also done well, that maybe your on-staff horticulturist may not be able to tackle on their own, right, for big projects. So you might bring in some help for them. In addition to like the physical jobs, you might hire, say, a grant writer if you find that what you're producing lately isn't quite working, but you don't need tons of grants. You just need these few in a short period of time. So you just hire somebody who can put all that information together for you, and then they're not necessarily on your payroll. You could have somebody who is a leadership expert that may come in and just do some consultation with your organization to kind of root out some problems and provide training and that kind of thing. So it's not just physical labor type jobs. It could also be the more office-y type jobs. But there's always a possibility that your organization is going to need something beyond the skill set and the scope of your organization's mission and beyond the staff skills that you have on hand anyway. And so you can bring someone in for that, and it might be a different vendor, it might be a different company. Especially if it's on a temporary basis, that's the way to go. When any of these folks come in, they may or may not blend in seamlessly with your existing staff, right? They may have their own company uniforms that they're wearing as they're walking around your grounds, right, at the zoo or aquarium. So you may see construction folks wearing their vest, the safety vest and a construction hat, and they're walking around. They look very much like a construction person, but they're in a local zoo or aquarium, right? It does happen. There also may be vendors that are secretly disguised as staff. You wouldn't know unless you were paying attention to the type of work that they're doing or where they are, that they are not the staff of the organization. Cases where we would do that, often I feel like the most likely case is food service. Your average zoo and aquarium staff people generally don't have a whole lot of experience in food service. It's kind of specialized. It requires a lot more specific knowledge about food preparation, food safety, etc. That is kind of a full-time job, but also probably is a little bit difficult for a lot of organizations to manage with their own staff, right? Obviously they can hire chefs, they can hire people who have worked in kitchens, whatever they need to do, but then they have to manage those folks. And not that it can't be done. It can, and it is sometimes done, but it's sometimes more practical for zoos and aquariums to hire a company that specializes in that sort of thing. So there are companies out there who specialize in providing food services who send their own staff and keep the kitchens organized so that everything is up to code and everyone there has the appropriate training, and their specialty really is food service, and they have many years of experience working food service. They may not have that experience working in a zoo or aquarium doing food service, but they are food service professionals. And so those folks we may have in our institutions, they might be dressed just like the rest of the staff is, because we really want them to feel a part of the zoo or aquarium and just kind of work seamlessly in with the staff, and have guests not really notice that they may not be gaining a check from the zoo or aquarium. They do work there, they work there every day, but they're actually technically employed by this vendor company who specializes in food service. A lot of times when you're looking at these other companies that are going to work hand in hand with your own staff and just be there every day working side by side with them. The issue is a lot of return on investment, right? So sure, the organization could hire a whole bunch more people with the intent of them being, for example, the food service people, and they would just have to keep up with a lot, right? They have to make sure that all of these people have the appropriate training to deal with, allergies and understanding food safety and cleanliness and all of that. And it's a lot for a zoo or aquarium to take on for their leadership staff to learn it well enough to manage those people and then to provide that ongoing training for those people as time goes on and as things change. COVID threw us all for a loop and changed everything about how we clean everything, right? And that still resonates today, And so having to keep up with all of that information on top of doing your whole other job of managing the zoo or aquarium, the stuff that our leaders typically know better, that's a lot to ask. And so, you tally up, you look at it, big picture, and you kind of look and see, is this worth the time and investment it's going to take to bring our animal care people or our, organization, nonprofit leaders up to speed on food service and food cleanliness and allergies and all of that kind of information? It's very valuable information. And yes, someone has to know it. But we've got to bring up our own leaders to that level to be able to manage a food service staff within our organization. And that's when you kind of have to decide, should we just pay a company to do that part where they're bringing in their own staff and they're keeping them trained and keeping them accountable and all of that other minutia daily management kind of stuff. And then we just focus on what we're good at, which is, maybe running this nonprofit or animal care or education or, development and philanthropy, like focusing on all of the other things that need to be done. And we just break off this piece. And now it is this other company who's now our vendor and who is going to provide the service as though it were the zoo or aquarium staff themselves. It's not only food service, but that's a very good, easy example to kind of contemplate. I've seen some facilities even incorporate animal care, external partners, as options for some of the entertainment/education that they offer. The most interesting example of this that I've seen is bird shows. So flight shows, it's kind of part fun, part education. Animals are moving around. They're highly trained. And there are companies that specialize or organizations that specialize in specifically those types of entertainment shows, right? And the reasoning is those animals are very highly trained, right? And it takes a lot of time and effort to maintain that training, right? And so your keepers that are on site managing the animals in the zoo or aquarium may not have that kind of dedicated time to put forth towards really specially training animals that are going to move on cue every time when they're part of like a bird show type environment, right? There's a lot of distractions that can happen with an audience. And so really having these behaviors down with these animals and making sure that they are focused and ready to move and really just show ready, I guess. That takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and the bulk of your animal care team may not be able to offer these animals that kind of dedicated attention because they've got however many animals that they also need to make sure get fed and taken care of and cleaned and all of the other things that we do. Not to say that the bird flight show is not doing that. Of course they are for those animals, but they have like a smaller group that they're responsible for taking care of. And often it's multiple trainers, right? And so there's a lot going on with those flight show animals. They get lots of attention. They get lots of interaction. It's very engaging for them just to keep them ready for the show at any point. And that allows, having them separate, right? That allows for the zoo to concentrate on what they do and for the bird show to be phenomenal in its own right, because all of those animals are getting individualized attention from trainers who really know what they're doing and are really able to spend tons of time with those particular animals to keep them show ready. The zoo or aquarium staff that is there, like, they know that these animals are around. They generally don't interact with the zoo or aquariums animals. Those are separate populations because, they're managed separately because the zoo or aquarium owns the animals that they have, and then this contracting bird show situation happens. They own the birds that they have. They're the whatever animals that they have. And so it's pretty separate. Those animals do not interact. But the keepers might, they might get some tips from the trainers from the bird show and vice versa, So it's not like they are completely separate entities, but they are almost separate, right? And the bird show folks might be wearing that same uniform that the zoo or aquarium folks do. And so it might look like they're the same group, but sometimes they're not. And this does not go for all flighted bird shows. It is just an easy example because I'm familiar with one particular company that does this all the time for many different zoos and aquariums and other types of venues. And so I've had the experience and the privilege of working with their trainers before, and they're fabulous. But they're doing a service and providing, a little more flexibility and freedom to the organizations that they work for because they don't have to train their animals to do all these things. They come with their birds and animals that are ready to go because they get worked with all the time. They get lots of attention. There's a large training team. These animals are ready for a show anytime. So why do we sometimes kind of disguise these vendors as part of our organizations, right? Why does it look like this vendor who works for another entity is actually a part of the zoo or aquarium staff? Like, they look like they're wearing the same uniform or shirt or whatever. We do that on purpose because we don't want to confuse our guests. If you ever walk around a zoo or aquarium, you'll notice that there are not many uniform variations, right? So you may have one uniform for your staff, you may have one uniform for your volunteers, you may have one uniform for your interns, right? And it might just be a different colored shirt or something like that. It's something to signify that, yes, they belong here, but at the same time, there's different levels of expertise happening, right? And so that is kind of a subtle signal to our guests that, okay, you're talking to a full-time staff member right now, and that looks different than the volunteer that you were just talking to. So you can probably ask some more in-depth questions, and stuff like that. And so we then dress these vendors sometimes in the same uniforms because we don't want our guests to think that there are too many things at play here, right? We want them to feel comfortable enough to come up to any staff member, whether they identify them as an intern or a volunteer or a full staff member or a vendor, and be able to feel like they can interact with any of them, right? They can ask their questions, and while that person may not know the deep details that guest is looking for, they probably know who to call, right? So we want our guests to feel comfortable coming up to any staff member to ask their questions or voice their concerns or what have you, and not worry about who they're talking to. We want to kind of provide that unified look so that nobody looks out of place and guests don't have to question who they're talking to. We don't necessarily want our vendor companies providing all of the uniforms to their staff working on our site every day, just because it may not line up with the vibe that we're going for in our zoo or aquarium. It may not look quite the same, and it may just look out of place, right? We didn't choose that uniform, and therefore it looks kind of weird next to all of our other uniforms, and this person sticks out like a sore thumb, right? And we don't want necessarily that look, and we don't necessarily want to confuse the guests with lots of different people wearing lots of different uniforms. Do you work here? Do you not work here? As someone who routinely gets approached when I go shopping, if I happen to be wearing my uniform, because apparently it look like every other store's uniform, even though it's an aquarium uniform. It's unnerving when people aren't sure whether they should talk to you, or if they do talk to you, they are completely mistaken because you're wearing the wrong uniform. You don't work there. You just happen to be, wearing a polo that day, right? And so it's a little weird and we don't want our guests to feel uncomfortable. We want them to recognize what staff members look like, and then all of our staff members, including some of these vendors that are working with us every day, are also wearing the same uniform. It's just one of those goofy little things. I'm sure nobody ever even thinks about that, but we want it to look like professional and cohesive. So that is why we outfit the people that even don't work for our organization, but are there every day and are part of the operation. We have them look like us too. Doing that has its pros and cons, though, I will mention, because yes, we didn't choose their uniforms necessarily, so we want them to wear our uniforms so that they look like our staff, but then they are not necessarily being trained like our staff unless you do so purposefully. So organizations where I've worked where we've had vendors that work with us every day, they are wearing our uniforms, and as part of that, as part of visually representing our organization, just like the staff members do, they have to go through an onboarding process to understand what is right and wrong about how we present ourselves to the public, right? So we definitely make sure that they understand we do this, we don't do that. Maybe we don't have our cell phones out. You're expected to have your hair tamed in some sort of way, and you're expected to have, black shoes, right? In your actual employer may not care about what your footwear looks like, but as long as you're working on these grounds with our staff, you're going to wear our shirt, you're going to wear those black shoes, right? And there are rules about that and how we want to interact with guests. So they go through a very similar onboarding process when they come to work at our facility, whether they've worked with their company for 10 years or not, right? They don't need to go through the onboarding with their company anymore, but they will go through onboarding with our organization while they're working in our facility and representing our staff. Because just like we don't want our guests to be confused when they walk up to a staff member, they don't need to know who is working for whom here. They just need to know, the answer to their question or how they can find it, and that people are being kind and are using their best customer service, right? And so we instill that into these vendors also that are representing us by wearing our uniform and being among the rest of the staff and working with us every day. We have the same expectations of these vendors that we do for our own staff members. Regardless of how these vendors are working and what their jobs are while they're on site with us, there's somebody who's on the staff who's kind of tasked with managing them and managing their interaction with our guests and our staff, right? And so it depends on what they're there for as to who that person will be, because in any organization you're going to have lots of different types of vendors and suppliers, and depending on what it is, that means that different, managers are the ones kind of quote unquote in charge of them while they're on site. And so, like for me, I work for a very small institution. We have suppliers come in and vendors come in that are providing specific services while they're on site. And I am typically there to make sure that while they are physically on site, I can unlock doors for them, let them through, and kind of intercept those guest questions if I can. Now, if I can't necessarily be there all day, so, I may delegate that, or if it's a vendor that we know really well and we've worked with well in the past, I'll leave them to their own devices because I know that they've gone through the training, they've gotten the spiel about how to deal with guests or how to deal with problems with the animals. Like, for example, if we have electricians dropping stuff into tanks, that's bad. That could really harm the fish. And so the vendors that I trust a lot, I can leave to work on their own just because they know that they have to cover the exhibits if they're going to work above them, or ask some of our staff to do it for them. And if, anything gets dropped, everything is accounted for before and after the work, right? So that nothing goes, unnoticed, and that we pick up everything so we don't harm the animals and cause hazard for guests. Regardless of whether I am standing there or not, or if we've worked with them a lot or not, I am kind of in charge while they're here, especially if they're working in my area, the back of house area, doing any kind of plumbing or, the floors, for example, were in my area. I'm responsible for them while they're on site, right? And so we talk about the hazards, what they need to watch out for, how they are going to impact the animals, how they're likely to impact staff or guests. And we talk about all that stuff before it begins, whatever work that they're doing. And I make sure that they have what they need, that they can move around relatively freely, or that they have my contact information or radio or my phone number or something like that, so that they can get a hold of me if they have any questions or concerns, if I'm not actually just standing there with them. And, in the instance where work is going to take a long time, I can't necessarily always be around, but I am checking in on a regular basis, and I have others check in as well. And so there's always somebody who's in charge of managing those suppliers and vendors while they're in our institution or on our grounds, just to make sure that they have what they need, they're getting checked up on, so that they don't go a completely different direction than what we had asked for the scope of work to be, And so we work with them as best we can and check up on them and make sure that they have everything they need to be successful, and that we're keeping an eye out for any potential hazards that we didn't already talk about, And so things are contained and under control and pleasant as can possibly be for the guests and the staff and the animals, so that nothing gets out of hand unexpectedly and gets too crazy that we couldn't have reacted and fixed ahead of time before it actually became a problem. So, while I would love for all of our institutions to be experts at plumbing and repair of pumps and filters and goodness knows what else we need to keep an organization and a building running, that's not really practical. There are people out there whose life's work is learning these kinds of systems and being very good at repairing and diagnosing and, doing maintenance on all of these different systems that keep a zoo or aquarium running, and that provide services that the zoo or aquarium may not be super talented with, right? And so having the option of having these suppliers and vendors that have these talents among them and employing them, giving them our business, is the way to go. And so no zoo or aquarium that you see is ever going to be entirely self-contained and entirely running on its own staff. There's always going to be vendors involved. There's always going to be suppliers that are intertwined with the staff somehow, and guests may never know it. As much as we would love to be able to do it all ourselves, it's not really practical. It's not really cost effective, right? It's going to cost way more for us to take our staff and learn teach them these skills and go to classes and conferences and get full certifications on these different aspects of the work that we need to get done every day. But then once we do that, they're not going to be using those talents every single day, right? We don't necessarily need to draw up designs for new buildings every single day. We have that happen every maybe couple of years. And in the meantime, we're kind of forgetting those talents, right? If we don't use them every day, which is why I'd much rather hire an architect who does this as their life's work, right? It's expensive to have them because they're very talented at what they do. They're good at what they do. And so we're going to pay for that. Because I would not want to have that messed up. Like, you sink that much money into a project and then you realize that you didn't have the right person doing that work, or maybe they don't have the right certifications. Maybe they haven't done it in a while. It's just easier and more responsible to hire somebody who does that kind of work every day and make sure that you're spending your money wisely. And instead of fixing mistakes that could happen because somebody's rusty, instead just hiring somebody who does this all the time and is very good at it and has lots of experience doing the thing that you're needing to have done. Our jobs and our interests tend to be relatively niche, and so we don't necessarily need to be the ones to execute all of the work that needs to be done to keep a zoo or aquarium running. There are fabulous, talented folks out there that we could ask to help us out, and it's a great partnership when it works. Okay. If you have any questions about that or any other zoo or aquarium things or leadership and management stuff, feel free to write it up in an email and send it to me at aquatazoo@gmail.com. If you're enjoying the show, and I hope that you do, don't forget you can follow or subscribe on your podcast player of choice. That way you'll get all of that sweet, sweet content as soon as it releases. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can find me at patreon.com/aquatazoo. And if you're looking to take a vacation and you don't know where to start, I happen to be a personal vacation advisor with Magical Vacation Planner, and I would love to help you out. It does not cost you anything extra. The links are in the show notes. Okay, thanks for listening. I heart your faces. Okay, bye.